So, have you ever stopped to actually think about how massive, complex businesses keep track of the invisible river of data that's pumping through their veins every single day? I mean, think about it. Every time a purchase is made, someone gets hired, or a paycheck is cut, there's this invisible data instantly zipping through a massive maze of departments, servers, and decision makers. So, how do these huge organizations make sure all that info doesn't just, vanish into thin air or get completely hopelessly tangled up? Well, the secret is that they rely on systems mapmakers, people who literally visualize the invisible.
Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are stepping right into the shoes of those very mapmakers to decode accounting information systems. We're going to see exactly how professionals take all those invisible data flows and turn them into crystal clear roadmaps that anyone can actually follow. If you've ever looked at a business process and felt totally overwhelmed by how the underlying systems operate, well, this is going to be incredibly eye-opening for you. Let's dive right in.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for today. Number 1, the power of documentation. 2, data flow diagrams explained. 3, rules for creating DFDs. 4, the language of flowcharts. And finally, number 5, 3 types of flowcharts. Starting off with Section 1, the power of documentation. Now you might be wondering, why bother creating all these complex maps and diagrams in the first place? Well, because in this world, documentation is absolutely not just some dusty manuals sitting forgotten on a shelf. It's actually a super dynamic set of models, things like narratives and flowcharts, that act as your ultimate guide. They literally describe the who, what, why, when, and where of an entire system. It gives us this comprehensive, bird's-eye view of how a business handles its inputs, processes, storage, and all its vital controls.
And here's a pretty surprising reality check for you. Learning how to do this isn't just some theoretical busywork. It is actually legally and professionally binding. There are strict auditing standards, specifically one called SAS 94, which explicitly requires independent auditors to fully understand a company's internal controls. Honestly, if you can't read these maps, you simply can't evaluate the quality or the security of a system. It's really a non-negotiable skill.
Moving right along to Section 2, data flow diagrams explained. Let's start with what we call a data flow diagram, or DFD for short. Think of this as our high-level satellite view of the system. And the best part, it relies on just 4 brilliantly simple elements. First up is the entity. That's usually a square representing where the data comes from or its final destination. Next is the data flow arrow, which literally just shows the actual movement. Third is the process circle, and that's where the transformation magic happens. And finally, we have the data store, which represents data at rest, kind of like a database. With just those 4 basic building blocks, you can map an entire data universe. But how do we actually scale our map up or down? Well, we use levels. A context level diagram is the absolute highest zoom out possible. It just shows the basic inputs and outputs of the whole system using one single process symbol. It's your classic 30,000-foot view. But if you drop down to what's called a level 0 diagram, we zoom in a bit. Suddenly, those major overarching activity steps are broken out and logically labeled, like 1.0, 2.0, and so on.
Which brings us to Section 3, rules for creating DFDs.
So, just like you wouldn't try to draw a geographic map without a compass, creating these DFDs requires some strict boundaries. The original source material actually outlines 13 pretty complex guidelines for this, but honestly, we can brilliantly condense them right down into 4 totally manageable map-making phases. Phase 1, establish your boundaries. Really understand the system and just ignore all the irrelevant background noise. Phase 2, identify your data flows, stores, and entities. Phase 3, group everything up and carefully number your transformational processes. And finally, Phase 4, label absolutely everything and just keep subdividing the map until the whole picture is crystal clear.
All right, on to Section 4, the language of flowcharts.
Now we're transitioning from that high-level satellite view all the way down to the granular, street-level view, the flowchart. Why do we shift from text to flowcharts down here? Well, just imagine trying to explain a 50-step payroll process using nothing but dense paragraphs of text. You would literally lose your audience by step 3. Flowcharts use symbols to logically depict the exact, precise flow of data. It is literally the difference between reading a huge textbook on how to build a house versus just looking at the blueprints. But to read those blueprints, we're going to need a visual vocabulary. At first glance, it kind of looks like having to learn a whole new alphabet, right? But these symbols actually categorize really neatly into 4 distinct families. We have input and output symbols, like that classic document rectangle with the wavy bottom. Then processing symbols, like the rectangles used for computer tasks. Storage symbols, like the cylinder shape for a magnetic disk. And finally, flow symbols, which are just the arrows that tie the whole shebang together. Once you learn this alphabet, you can read pretty much any system's blueprint.
Let's look at Section 5, 3 types of flowcharts.
So with our shiny new symbolic alphabet in hand, what kinds of maps can we actually draw? We typically categorize these street-level flowcharts based on their primary purpose. Number 1 is the document flowchart, which literally illustrates the flow of physical paper and digital files. Number 2 is the system flowchart, and this shows the logical relationship between inputs, processes, and outputs. And number 3 is the program flowchart, which dives way down deep into the actual computer logic.
Let's actually see this in action. Take a look at this document flowchart. Notice how these columns separate the different departments. Imagine a brand new employee just got hired. Over on the far left, Human Resources generates the new employee data. If you follow the arrows, we see physical documents, things like time cards, flowing right into payroll. We can see manual processing symbols showing exactly where paychecks are prepared and files are updated. By tracking this physical paperwork across departmental boundaries, an auditor can instantly pinpoint exactly where a document might get lost or even tampered with. It's super helpful.
And if we keep tracking that exact same flow to the next stage, our map crosses right over into management and the general ledger. Look over at the management column, let's say that's run by Susan. We see precisely where the payroll checks arrive, and then we hit a manual process symbol for approve and sign checks. Now that is an absolutely critical internal control. From there, the approved documents splinter off to the bank, to the employees, and vital vouchers flow directly over to Ashton in the general ledger to finally be posted. It's total 100% transparency.
Now, if we swap gears to a system flowchart, the entire landscape changes. Notice we aren't tracking paper across human departments anymore. Instead, we're mapping the vital relationships between hardware and software. So a sales terminal inputs data, which then moves into a computer processing block. From there, it hits our storage symbols, those cylinders we talked about earlier, updating multiple databases all at once: accounts receivable, inventory, and the general ledger. Guys, this right here is the entire digital nervous system of the sales process.
But wait, what actually happens inside that square computer process box? Well, that is exactly where the program flowchart comes in. It reveals the super granular if-then decision pathways that are hidden inside a single computational process. It takes input data, hits a decision diamond that essentially asks, is a specific condition met, and then routes the flow to either yes, to perform a calculation, or no, to loop right back around. This is the absolute atomic level of our systems map.
So we have journeyed all the way from the high-altitude data flow diagrams down to the microscopic if-then logic of program flowcharts. We've seen exactly how just a few simple symbols can completely demystify massive organizational processes. So I want to leave you with this final thought. Think about the organizations that you interact with every day, or even the one you work for right now. Are their internal systems clearly mapped out for success, guaranteeing efficiency and tight internal controls? Or are they just sort of navigating their data blind, hoping that invisible river of information somehow flows to the right place? Understanding documentation gives you the power to finally turn on the lights. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep exploring.